All right, so the first element we're gonna look at is line. And line is the path of moving point. It's making marks. It's horizontal, vertical, diagonal, straight, curved, or free-formed lines. They can be thick or thin, light or dark, dash, dot, rough, smooth, zigzagged, implied, etc. And we have certain tools that would be beneficial for that one. So the first thing you're gonna do is you're gonna double click on the line artboard and make sure you go there. Now I'm gonna have you use different layers for the different artboards as well to help organize yourself and get into that habit. So you're gonna have your first layer, and I want you to double click on it and call it line, because we're going to be working with representing an apple in lines. This is also when you can think about using a bamboo tablet for drawing lines. So first thing let's look at is right here. This is similar to Photoshop, right? Where we have fills and strokes. So this solid square, this is a fill. This refers to the area inside of a path, right? And this right here, it's a stroke. This is the stroke of an object, the stroke of a line, right? So understanding that this is where fills and strokes are set for whatever you're working on, right? And if you actually drew an object, it's using the fill and the stroke that's right here. And you can switch it this way if something's selected, and you can also see the one with the red that's slashed through it. That means it's none. And that is something that's the fundamental importance of fill and stroke. It's very similar to Photoshop. So now we're gonna actually not be looking so much at the shape tools, but be looking at the paintbrush and the pencil options. And you can see here we have the paintbrush, which shortcut is B, and the pencil of N. Now they're very similar. The main difference is that the paintbrush is more pressure sensitive, so you might want to use this if you're using one of the Wacom tablets, and the pencil creates more points, and there's certain options you can do in terms of smoothing it and other tools that work in conjunction with the pencil. I encourage you to play around with both of them. When you click on these, right, you'll notice versus when you go to another tool that your top menu changes depending on your tool. So we're gonna be working with the pencil and the pen. I want you to play around with both of them. And you'll see if we start with the paintbrush, we have different options right here. Now there's something that I also want you to open up while we're working on this. I want you to go to Window, and I want you to open up the stroke panel. So if this is not open, I want you to go to Window, Stroke, and I want you to have the stroke panel open, all right? The other one I want you to go and open for the duration of this project is Appearance. So if this isn't open, go Window, Appearance. This is where you can set the stroke and the fills for any of the objects that you're drawing, and you can actually set multiple strokes and multiple fills. So when we have our brush, we can see we can set it here, but one of the reasons we want to bring out the panel is that this way we have more options. And within a panel, you can actually show more options. So within the right hand side, there's this little corner, and you can say show options. And this allows you to show even more options. And we're going to go over that a little bit. So with the brush tool, we can draw things. And you're like, I don't see anything. Well, guess what? You actually have to set your stroke to something that you can see. So since it's automatically a white background, if you want it to actually be a different background, you can't just fill. You'd have to create a box and fill this with the color. So say I want my background to be black because I want to be drawing white. So my stroke is set to white. I don't need a fill if I'm using one of these drawing tools. And now I'll be able to see that I can draw. Now this tells me what my brush is, and this gives me my weight, and I want you to play around with changing your weight. So what happens if I change my weight to a lot thicker? Whoa, that's what happens. So what happens when I change some of these, brush heads? What happens when I change some of the line strokes? Oh, this changes my mark making. So changing the way you do your lines, your marks, this is going to change the feeling that is evoked from your mark making. So this is the brush, and I want you to play around with all the features that are automatically set up here, right? Now here's the pencil, and remember there's other options here. If we hold down, we can see other options. So the pencil has the smooth and the erase, and the brush doesn't have that, and that's kind of one of the big differences, right? So the brush tool and the pencil tool. and they're slightly different. So play around with those and play around with changing some of the weights and changing some of the options here. Now you might see there's this little, looks like stacks of books. This is libraries. This means that there's built-in other options, libraries that you can use. And I encourage you to also open this up and check it out. So for example, artistic, we have a bunch of options, ink and charcoal. This will change the kind of mark that you're making. Once you make a mark, you can also change it. So if I go and I select this mark that I've already made, I can go in and now change it. I can change both the style, I can change the thickness, I can change the color. And now that, since the fill was on top, it changes the fill. And you can see this is a open path. And I do not want there to be a fill. I actually want to make sure that I'm on the stroke right here and I'm changing the color. So make sure you know that you're selecting the stroke or the fill. And for any of these, the paintbrush or the pencil, you don't really want a fill, you want just the stroke. One additional little tidbit of knowledge is that if you're painting with the brush tool and you know how you're automatically making an open path, you can actually hold down the Alt key. So I start drawing and I hold down the Alt and you'll see there's a little circle. This means that it's going to be closing that path. So if I look at this now, this is a closed path versus automatically it's just an open path. Now there's just one more thing that I'm going to show you before I release you into the world to go play with creating an apple using just mark making with the brush and the pencil tool. And that is this one right here, which is the Blob brush tool. A brush mark, and I say I wanted to make like a circle. Blah, blah, blah. This is a whole bunch of different paths. This is different than the brush blob tool, which if I draw something with the brush blob tool, this is not a bunch of different paths. This blobs it all together. So if you're actually coloring in something, you're going to want to use the brush blob tool because this lets you create it into one solid object versus if I have it right here, you can see these are all different kinds of paths. And if I keep adding to it, it doesn't add to it. They're just more paths that you're adding. And you might say, oh, but they look very similar. This is just different, say, if you actually want it to have a fill. So if you change that, you can see the fill. It's not a closed object versus this one. If we change it to having just a fill, you can see it's actually a closed object. So your job right now is to play with the pencil and the brush tool and create your version of an apple.